everybody, and welcome back to Ask The Unfaithful. You know me as Sam, but you know the smarter one as James Anir. James, how are you today on this beautiful Monday?
You are too kind, sir. Too kind. I am very well. Thank you. Working hard, hardly working, really working hard.
You're always working hard. Don't lie to the audience. Just kidding. So today we're talking about a real hot topic. Now, for those of you that are listening, there has been some conversations out there in the world about arousal templates, and not all of the conversations have gone well. I've talked to many of people who have been mishandled and have been misinformed. And there's lots of misconceptions on the arousal template. And so, on behalf of James and myself, and all of the people that help James do intensives, and all of the people that have gone before us who have done both great work and maybe have done some not so great work on the arousal template, today's discussion is going to be a wonderfully safe conversation for both the unfaithful and the betrayed. Today's conversation is filled with fascinating information because, quite honestly, James, we know that as we unfaithful, if we don't know why we've done what we've done, how could we ever prevent it from happening again, right?
Impossible. We can't prevent it if you don't know what you're looking at and you don't know what's driving you, what your triggers are, what your blind spots are. And this is how you find out, at least the basic concrete ones, which are not necessarily obvious. That's the problem.
That's exactly the problem. It's not obvious. And we unfaithful love the obvious. Well, I wish we loved our blind spots and I wish we loved our shadow because we wouldn't have maybe ever been in this place. But today's formal title is Understanding the Arousal Template, a Key to Healing for the Unfaithful Partner, which makes it also a key to the betrayed because I know every betrayed out here who's trying to save the relationship would say, if you can help my unfaithful, find out why they do what they do and why their arousal template is the way that it is, they would celebrate it. They would be incredibly thankful. So, as we launch out into the deep, as we always do,
Mhm.
why don't you share a few thoughts on why understanding the arousal template really matters so much in this world?
I think primarily we're talking about the triggers and blind spots. Like you said, there are so many that maybe we can see really easily, but there are so many that we can't. And those are the ones that are going to keep needling us or driving us in that direction that we don't want to go anymore. So it's essential to understand it. This is part of the answer to the why as well, why we did that in the first place. And if we don't heal why we did it in the first place, we're not going to heal the behaviors long term. We won't be able to hold on to that. We'll relapse. With that, we need to say that people think, oh, well, this is about having fun or it's about sex. It's not. It's actually about healing your emotional and psychological blueprint for connection. And that's a big, big, deep, deep statement. We're going to explore a bunch of things that go into that. The key, though, is self understanding is going to reduce our shame. It's going to reduce those other drives and it's going to increase emotional literacy, which is basically a term for emotional intelligence, our understanding of what's really going on for us at any given time. It also is going to help us pause and ask, what am I actually seeking when I feel sexually or emotionally triggered? So it's really important here. This is also, it's not just about sexual acting out, it's also about emotional acting out. When we know this template, it really opens the door to healing all of those core wounds that we talk about: rejection, abandonment, invisibility, powerlessness. We're also going to see as we talk today how those things actually come out in what we're doing when we act out. What are we actually looking for there, and what does that look like? The other reason for understanding what our own template is and what it means is it's going to provide a path to build a new intimacy based arousal template over time. We're not stuck with this arousal template. We can actually change it. We can change it into something very healthy, very connective. And that's really one of the bases of moving forward with our partner in relational recovery.
Well, and I think it really speaks to the fact that This is a wonderful discussion for both parties because if the betrayed can find out and understand more about why the unfaithful has done what they've done, that can lead to a sense of security, but also a sense of, hey, moving forward, we have to look out for these things, right? We don't have to be a horse with blinders on. We can open up our eyes and hearts and see some things. But it's masterfully important for the unfaithful because if we don't do this work, it's impossible to have a long term recovery without relapse and with growth and with progress. So I guess we've put the cart a little bit before the horse. So why don't you drop some nuclear bombs on what is the arousal template?
Okay, so Patrick Carnes is the person to credit here for coming up with the idea, putting it in a book, and including it in the teaching that, because I actually learned directly from Patrick Carnes while he was still teaching, which was a wonderful experience. So he calls it this, and I've added just a little bit just to bring it into the emotional arena as well. So the definition is this: the constellation of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, images, and fantasies that sexually arouse or emotionally attract a person. It's a really nice, clear definition. Carnes is really good at those clear definitions. So
Right.
here's the deal: it's shaped early in life, often before we even understand what sex or intimacy really mean. The template itself actually becomes sort of your emotional DNA for desire. That is until we change it, right? So we can actually change that DNA. And until we get to that place where we understand it and can work to change it, that desire is driven by this template. It's personal, it's patterned, it's powerful, extremely powerful. It'll drive us in ways that we can end up going, what am I doing? And not understand why we ended up there. There is a healthy arousal, of course, or a healthy arousal template, but you have to remember that the one that we have until we start to heal isn't necessarily healthy or loving, right? It's
Right.
often not so much that, and it's really about what's familiar, especially when we're under stress or feeling ashamed.
People all the time will comment in the wild, wild west of Instagram, YouTube, whatever, you name it. And they're like, what's the work? What's the work? This is exactly part of what the work is. How did we get here? How and why are we here? And where do we go? So many times people say, what's the work? It's clearly not what you're doing. If you're having to ask me, it's indicative that you're not doing it. This is the heavy lifting where we have to get the scalpel out and we have to get into understanding it. And your emotional DNA is so vitally important. Okay, you just alluded to the fact that it's formed when we're young. So, how is the template actually really formed?
It's really shaped by emotional experiences more than, say, physical ones, even though there are abuse type of situations where physical ones shape us as well. But it's much more the emotional experiences. Emotions like shame, fear, guilt, even grief can be, as Carnes calls it, eroticized. I just want to say here, eroticized comes from the Greek word eros, which is actually the name of the god of love. So we're talking about not just sex, but the whole gamut of intimacy when we talk about being eroticized. The modern definition is purely about sex. Anytime that those emotions, the shame, fear, guilt, grief, and so on, are paired with something else frequently, then it's going to create this template. So let's say that we experience guilt or fear repeatedly in early life, and then that's paired with, say, a stimulation or secrecy. That's going to form really strong unconscious associations with arousal. Over time, a person can seek out experiences that reproduce the emotional states, generally not consciously, but because their nervous system now links that discomfort with relief or intensity, then that is going to happen more and more and more. So it kind of builds on itself. Some example patterns could be, let's say, secrecy plus pleasure equals arousal from keeping secrets, the why of why we keep secrets. Abandonment plus longing ends up with intimacy confusion, meaning Where am I going to find this intimacy that's going to make me feel less lonely? There are some common influences that happen that really catalyze the DNA or the embedding of this, and that's family dynamics. Those could be around gender roles, affection, emotional availability of the rest of our family, the messages that we have, you can't talk about that, or we're not going to hug in public, or any kinds of things like that. Another influence is emotional neglect, abandonment, rejection, inappropriate over involvement, even by a caregiver. And then, of course, we can get into some of the big ones like early trauma or abuse, bullying. And remember the unmet needs, the unmet childhood needs I always talk about that
Right.
aren't necessarily traumatic in and of themselves, but if you compile them all, they are. And then things like early exposure to sexual contents, whether it's intentional or accidental. I was exposed in a big way to porn when I was 6, and that had a huge effect on my arousal template. Reinforcement of secrecy or shames around sexual feelings or expressing emotions. So some people have had the experience of being caught masturbating when they're young or when they're just discovering what that is, and then being shamed for it by a mother who walks in, for instance, who's shocked, but she,
Right.
you can't do that. That's evil or whatever.
Hmm.
Right? That kind of shame surrounding the sexual feelings drives it where? Into secrecy. There's this desire or need to explore oneself sexually, and then because there's shame attached to it, it's done secretly. That then builds on itself throughout life. And then early family dynamics that go into adulthood. I've written out some examples here. I've tried to keep them somewhat short. Okay, I really had to work at getting these shorter, truthfully. You know me. Let's say you have a boy who feels emotionally invisible at home. His family, in fact, are not very affectionate. That lack of affection increases sensitivity to rejection later, but also results in intimacy adversity, meaning by avoid to some level, could be all the way up to anorexia or more. So this person, as they grow up and into adulthood, now needs intimacy and understanding and is attracted to that in another person, even if it's scary and they pull back from it. That doesn't have to mean that the only person that they are attracted to that in is their partner. That's where the acting out comes. Second one, someone raised in a household where love was unpredictable or conditional may eroticize rejection or humiliation, not because they want to suffer, but because that emotional terrain feels familiar and arousing as they get into adulthood. And then number 3, a little more in depth, a boy who's raised in a strict household learns that autonomy, the ability to explore and learn their own level of empowerment and delight, joy in what they're doing, is punished. He begins hiding what brings him that joy or his own curiosity. Over time, that secrecy becomes normalized and even exciting to do because he's getting away with something, right? He's not being punished, he's getting away with it. He learns to lie in order to feel safe, and that also gives him a sense of power. Then in adulthood, arousal becomes linked to deception, control, and forbidden acts.
And in all of this, what we're not saying is, hey, betrayed, go easy on your unfaithful. They had a tough childhood. No, this is extrapolating out why we unfaithful do what we do. I'm quite positive that if we'd have done this work early on after our acting out years and years ago, our recovery would have went like this. It wouldn't have been perfect, but it sure would have went more like this rather than what it looked like in reality because we didn't have this knowledge. And what we're not saying is, hey, betrayed, back off, just kind of understand they had a difficult childhood. Absolutely not. This is the work that you unfaithful, us unfaithful, have to do. If we're going to gain any ground, if we're going to be able to be safe for our partner, but safe for ourselves. Because safety is an inside job. My great friend John Lee said that. And so making ourselves safe for our kids, our spouses, our partners, everybody in our universe. So we come to this point, right? How does our acting out reflect our arousal template?
Being that this is about unmet emotional needs, and this isn't to say, hey, partner, you're not meeting my needs. This is to say they weren't met in
Exactly.
childhood. So needs in childhood, when they're not met, become what? Desperation in adulthood.
Yeah.
And no one person
Right.
can fill that except ourselves, that inside job. So I'm going to just run through some various feelings that we may have that create a certain kind of acting out, which I think will be helpful in becoming more aware of your template so that you can do something about it. That's the whole point of being aware, is to be able to go, that's why that's happening. Oh, okay, that gives me a direction that I need to go. So
Yeah.
let's look at a few. Powerlessness. We described that in example number 3 before, but what that ends up with is domination, which sounds like, but really that's one-upmanship or a better thanness. So I'm going to put you down in order for me to feel more powerful or feel that sense of power. It's not a good thing because it's not real empowerment. It's not good empowerment. It's power over somebody else.
Yeah.
You feel less powerless. That shame we always talk about. Let's call it unworthiness. So what do? We seek validation. Almost always risky validation, because the bigger the taboo, so to speak, the more we feel better about ourselves, but it doesn't last. That risky validation can also be what I call cheap validation. Now, let's say that kid who feels invisible. Guess what? If you felt invisible as a kid and it wasn't resolved, then probably you're going to feel pretty invisible as an adult. So, what do? We look for attention, and we're prone to secrecy, looking for attention from all those outside people and keeping secrets about it. Really, what are we keeping secrets? Anything that makes us feel good. Let's say anxiety, pretty common. What do? This is weird, but we create conflict in our relationships. Why? Because conflict makes us want connection to feel soothed. So then we seek that connection from somebody else that we are not in conflict with. So we sexually act out or emotionally act out as a way to feel connected. Feeling unseen? What do? We look for attention. Oh, pity me. Pity me, I'm the victim or the star. I'm great at everything, or I'm Mr. Life of the party, or the sexual worship, basically. I'm the best at this performance, right? And so we look at that as proof that we matter. Feeling lonely. This one's pretty obvious, forming inappropriate emotional attachments that really don't have any requirement of us to feel responsible. They feel easy and like there's no cost to them.
And you've said it before, these behaviors become coping strategies when emotional regulation is absent. Because if we can't regulate ourselves, we need somebody else or something else to regulate us.
Yeah.
And then we get into the point where what feels adrenalized and pleasurable is often what once felt dangerous but familiar. And you talked about this earlier. It's the familiarity that just rips through our nervous system that says it might be unhealthy and it might be dark, but man, does it feel familiar. Because acting out bypasses vulnerability and it provides a massive shortcut to a false sense of relief because these patterns reinforce themselves and really become automatic without awareness. Now, genius of all automatic without awareness, we are not saying that the unfaithful don't have a lot of responsibility to take and amends to make, but maybe you should throw out a caveat to that because these patterns reinforce themselves and they become automatic without awareness. Why do they do that? Why do they become automatic without our awareness? Because
We're blind to it. It's like feel pain, want to get rid of pain. It just becomes almost reflexive. So we just automatically go to those to feel better. Feeling better doesn't mean healthy,
Right.
just means can I get rid of whatever the pain is, like right now?
Adrenaline, dopamine, release, fantasy, escape. That's the emotional immaturity
Yeah.
that we as unfaithful typically across the board display. It's why we act out. But there are necessary components of the arousal template. Here's where we get into identifying it, to heal it, to transform it, to change it. So, what are some of the necessary components of these arousal templates?
So eroticized emotions. What emotions, say for instance, anger, fear, shame, loneliness, seem to be linked to arousal for you? Sounds like a simple thing. You're going to really have to think about it. Everybody out there who's going to do this has to really think about what happens with different emotions. What emotional state do you tend to be in before acting out? Those are a couple of really good questions to ask to be able to get these eroticized emotions in the awareness zone. Then we got situations and places. This is often much easier than the eroticized emotions. Are there particular places, hotels, cars, airports, areas of town, or situations like feeling alone or being alone, criticize that increase your arousal or preoccupation or desire to escape or self soothe? There are basic sensory triggers. These are things that you may not anticipate well, but you'll notice when they happen. Specific sounds, smells, sights, textures, tastes that actually activate your arousal response. Object. Are there certain objects, types of clothing, devices, accessories? What are those things have become eroticized for you? Phones, iPads. Those are some of the modern things, right? Processes or rituals. Are there certain behaviors or routines? Scrolling, dressing a certain way, watching specific types of media, all of that might have become part of your arousal or acting out cycle. Body parts and characteristics. Are there certain physical features or traits like body type, hair, movement, that sort of thing that consistently appear in your fantasies or compulsive behaviors? If you know those things, then you know also what you need to work on shutting down or shutting out so that it's not around you. Here's a biggie: characteristics of people. This is going to be one of those deeper dives of trying to figure this out. But what types of people have historically been arousing to you? People who are unavailable, people who are powerful, younger, older, nurturing, those who mirror early relationships, or those who are the opposite of early relationships. What do those traits symbolize or represent to you emotionally? That's a great question to follow up with. And then lastly, cultural or identity based patterns, things like race, religion, social roles, power dynamics. Have those played any kind of a role in your arousal patterns? And then the second follow up question to that is, if so, what meaning might they carry? So these are not all easy questions. These are questions that are going to require you to really look into it and detail it out. It's always good to have somebody who can help you work through this.
And I think it's exceptional to be able to take that, write them down. The tendency, and I know from being in this position, the tendency is to be like, oh, this is too hard. This kicks off shame and this kicks off humiliation or this kicks off embarrassment. This is why we need emotional resilience.
Yeah.
This is why we have to be able to do this kind of work because it's our blind spots. We're only as sick as our secrets. This is how we uproot the secrets that we've been holding on to. So, you alluded to this earlier, and being able to develop a recovery practice. So, how do we reflect and rewire? I love the verbiage that you used, reflect and rewire.
Well, first of all, that reflecting, what are these questions? Now I got to sit back and think about them, right? What are the answers? Let me think about those. How do they sit? That discomfort you talked about, that is how we rewire, because we have to understand the thing before we can make the change. I think something to be gentle about is to remember that it's not a pathology. This is not a disease, unless it's an addiction, of course, so much as it's really the way you adapted to whatever was coming your way as you grew up. But in adulthood, those adaptations don't work very well anymore and they become limiting and destructive, especially to relationships. So when these eroticized emotions aren't understood, they actually drive those unconscious behaviors that feel compulsive or confusing. Naming them allows you to pause and choose connection over compulsion. So I'm actually going, okay, well, here's something that's emotional for me that actually makes me want to run and self soothe or soothe with somebody else and keep that a secret, right? So if I name that, now I'm allowed to go, or I'm able to go, wait a minute, I don't want that. I want connection here. So I'm going to talk to, connect with my partner, if it's the right time in recovery, of course, or
Right.
somebody else, a support, a mentor, and so on. There are some ways that we can do this. Most people out there not really big on journaling, but journaling, as we've said many times, doesn't have to be some book. You're not writing War and Peace. But you can also reflect. I always warn when you're just reflecting and not writing, I always have pen and paper in hand,
Hmm.
because it can get very circular, right? When you write it, it's linear, and then you can actually come to conclusions. You can reflect on things like what emotions or relational dynamics tend to trigger my arousals? What surrounds those things that I've just named in my template? When have I felt emotionally unsafe and tried to use sex or fantasy or emotional connection with somebody who's not appropriate to escape? What's the emotional payoff that I'm chasing in those behaviors? Obviously, consider working with a therapist or a coach or support group to map your template. You're going to miss things if you try to do it all on your own.
Yeah.
Then avoid the triggers that you can, the concrete ones, the ones you name in the template. That's your first step, avoiding those. Does it end there? No, because the awareness is vital. It's the what you do with it, not just the avoiding, because otherwise those things keep driving it. So we have to create a new template. We have to consciously replace old thought patterns that stem from emotional triggers. Oop, gonna do this, or the automated stuff, right? Check what you're being triggered by against your arousal template. Then affirm. You love this word. Be intentional
Hmm.
and begin to practice actively new arousal patterns that are rooted in intimacy, safety, and mutuality.
That requires healthy alternatives or other options like being supportive, being present, being vulnerable. Now, vulnerable is difficult, especially early on in recovery. It can be a challenge, but I teach guys or even women sometimes bring it into the room and go, I'm really trying to be vulnerable. I'm struggling with X or Y or Z. And prepping the betrayed to be able to say, okay, when they use that verbiage, they're really trying to dig deep. They're really trying to it's like they're on a bench press and they're trying to really push and be like, oh, I'm going to try not to be a jerk face right now. I'm going to try and be vulnerable and show you that I am trying to not be harsh or mean or rude. But it takes practice and it takes massive amounts of repetition. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so it's being able to go, I got to plan this. I'm going to try this. This is what I can do. It's writing stuff down. It's doing work to be able to come into an understanding of why I do what I do. Because until we're willing to do work, we're not going to see much benefit at all. And so, isn't it true that we are not bad for what arouses us, but we are responsible for how we handle that, correct?
Oh, that is so true. And, that's important because we grew up the way we grew up. These things came to us in a way that we didn't know any better for what was going on. early on in our lives. Now, as we explore this, we do know better, and now we know what's driving it. I do want to say that when we're taking responsibility, we also have to look at, where am I going to put that? Who am I going
Mm.
to be vulnerable with about that? So when we're talking about vulnerability with our partner, it's not to say, oh, I was aroused by this or that today, because that's harmful, hurtful at the very least.
Our spouse is not our accountability partner.
No, and cannot be. They don't have the emotional bandwidth for that, because they're spending, or hopefully are spending, their emotional bandwidth on their own healing. So when we talk about vulnerability, we're talking about, this is what I'm feeling right now. And I'm working on that with my therapist, with my coach, with my sponsor. And when we're taking responsibility, that discernment about, why was I aroused then? Guess who we're calling? Sponsor. Or we're making an appointment with our coach or our therapist to work through that, so that that doesn't land on our partner. We need to have, this is really hard, especially if that basis was that feeling unworthy,
Yeah.
shame based, right? Having that self compassion to do this work is really important, because it's not easy work. And we can very easily look at this arousal template and go, what is wrong with me, man?
Mm-hmm.
And we need to go, okay, that happened for reasons that I couldn't have avoided. I wouldn't have known any different. And now I do. So I can keep getting curious, or that ongoing inquiry about myself and what's going on. I can be relationally accountable, and I can avoid self condemnation, which we've talked about in a couple episodes before. So you have to kind of know. I love this. I don't even know where this quote comes from. I tried looking it up, so it might have been something I made up. Your arousal template isn't a prison, it's a map. And now you have the key to read it.
I think if we're serious about relapse prevention, if we're serious about finding the why, and the why comes from doing work and getting help. Today was the first session with a gentleman, and I said, in my kind of beginning conversation, tell me some of the work you've done. And he had done so much work, and I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could record the things that you've done and show other men and women who've been unfaithful. This is the work, bro. Intensives, working with different type of people, trying even just to find another edge on the diamond. But there was not 1 ounce of laziness in his recovery. I mean, he was doing so much. And there's so many men and women out there who are really doing a lot. But this is a wonderful map for you to begin to say, why do I want what I want? How did I find myself in this position? And how can I really do some heavy lifting to heal and to heal my partner? My partner is not going to heal me. I have to do the work to heal me. We have to do our own work. We can never, ever, ever heal without doing our own work. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. Nobody can do it for you. People can help you.
Yeah,
And accessing that help is vital. And we have to do the work for ourselves. The only way out
absolutely.
is through.
Amen, brother. That's the dang truth. We are just overjoyed that you once again sat with us. We are thrilled that you would take time out to watch and or listen. And we've had numbers of inquiries saying, how do we book a session? How do we see James and Sharon or do an intensive for ourselves or for couples? You can do that by just reaching out to asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. You can also reach myself as well. We don't do counseling or therapy or coaching over email. We're glad to make a couple of suggestions or see if you want to work with us or point you in a direction of someone that we know that might be perfect for you. We are just honored to do the work that we do, and we're passionate because we've been where a lot of you are at, and we're thrilled that you would trust us with your time. So once again, we'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.